field. He's currently working at the Language Center, that's it, of Ricardo Palma University, where he's both an English teacher and academic support. So welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for the lovely introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited to be here again. Last conference was in October, so I'm really glad to be back with a very interesting topic, which is communicative competence. And I would like to begin with this quote that I found by Noam Chomsky, and it's, "Language is a process of free creation. Its laws and principles are fixed, but the manner in which the principles of generation are used is free and infinitely varied. Even the interpretation and use of words involves a process of free creation." And that's actually that I love about English language, that there are so many different words, so many expressions that we can use to express different things. And it's something that we're going to review today. So the aims of today's session are to identify the components of communicative competence and to implement activities to develop communicative competence. So at the end of the conference, you will have a different idea of what you originally thought communicative competence was, or that's what I think. And it's going to give you insight because we're going to take a look at an array of techniques, strategies, activities that you can use in the classroom. So what is communicative competence? I want to see some of your ideas in the chat box. What do you understand by communicative competence? I'm going to give you a few seconds to think of your answer. What's communicative competence? Can you hear me well, by the way? Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you, Veronica. The effective way we say something. All right, effective, I like that. Janet says it's to be able to communicate effectively. Okay, effectively again. Yes. Okay, Carol says the ability to communicate effectively. Oh, wow, okay. Yes. You know, smart minds think alike. Very good. So that's actually really close to the definition I have. Okay, Yamir says is the ability to achieve communication goals in a socially appropriate manner. Okay, I like that one. Yes, we're actually going to talk about that, in a social environment. Ala says the capacity, okay, the capacity to express her feelings and needs with effectiveness. Okay, the ability to say something, make yourself understood. I like that. Thank you very much, Jose. To follow a clear communication, understand what others say to you, a person's ability, the power to be orally productive. Very good. Thank you very much for your ideas. That's correct. So, well, my definition is that communicative competence is the general ability to communicate accurately and effectively in different contexts using cohesion and coherence. So that's important, right? And these words are in bold because those are the most important words that I found, and we're going to break them down, in the future, right? In a couple of minutes, actually. So when we think about communicative competence, I think about school and I think about classes, and I've seen some teachers, how they see like the English lesson, and they see English as content. They have midterm exams, they have final exams, and they are written exams, right? So I think it would be great if they have more opportunity to be communicative. It's a good opportunity to reflect, right? We're going to reflect throughout this conference. So since we're talking about communicative competence, what is competence? Noam Chomsky, you probably know him. He is an American linguist, a cognitive scientist and philosopher who radically changed the arena of linguistics by assuming language as a uniquely human cognitive capacity. You probably remember Noam Chomsky from the theory of universal grammar, where he suggested that every language has some of the same laws, right? So every language has a way to ask a question, they make negative statements, and he suggested and he said that children are born with an innate understanding of grammar, right? But today we're not going to focus on the universal grammar. We're going to focus on competence. And he said, he introduced the concept of competence and performance. So what is the difference between competence and performance? So competence, he said the competence is the person's knowledge of the language. It is the underlying grammatical system. So in short, competence involves knowing the language, whereas performance is the production of actual utterances. So performance involves doing something with the language. And please don't get confused with proficiency as well, which is a very similar term. If competency refers to the essential skills required, then proficiency implies a certain of mastery. When you master the language, right? That's proficiency. But now we're just focusing on competence and performance. So I think it's good to, make clear the difference between those two terms, because Chomsky separates them, right? And he says that competence is basically an idealized capacity, that it's located as a psychological or mental property. It's not something observable, whereas performance, it is. So here's an example. Let's say that you are a native speaker of English and utter the following sentence. We swam in the ocean this weekend. Swimmed. Look at this. So is this error due to competence or performance? I want to see your answers in the chat. What do you think? I have one for competence. Any other person? Okay, someone said performance. Performance, competence, performance. Okay, performance. Let's see. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. So I'm gonna give you the answer, but before I give you the answer, let me tell you the backstory of this. So it is most likely that native speakers know how to conjugate irregular verbs, right? A native speaker probably knows that the past of swim is swam. So linguists use the distinction between competence and performance to illustrate the intuitive difference between accidentally saying swimmed and the fact that a child, for example, or a non-proficient speaker may say swimmed consistently, right? So this is actually an error of proficiency. I'm sorry, performance. It's performance. Why? Because he probably knows the grammar. He probably knows the grammar rules. This time he just had a mishap, right? An accident, right? It was accidentally, right? He didn't want to say swimmed. But remember that competence is not observable, and that's knowledge. So if he knows it, that's great. But performance is something different. And that's very, very common in learners when we say, for example, I remember when I was learning English, I used to say people is all the time. But of course, I knew that it was incorrect, right? It was people are, and I repeated it and I repeated it. But I kept saying people is. I don't know why, maybe because of, Spanish, which is similar. I knew that it was people are, but I still said people is. So I was competent, but I couldn't demonstrate it, right, in my performance. So how do we know that students have learned a language? We can assess students using formative and summative assessments, right? But are we going to know that they actually understand? Because when we present, for example, let's say we have to give a presentation, I get really, really nervous when I have to present in front of a class, a new topic, for example. well, I am not nervous now, but when I have to present, in a different scenario, I get really, really, really anxious, really nervous. And sometimes, I have accidents. Sometimes I don't have the performance that I wanted, but that doesn't mean that I'm not competent in the language, right? So here's another example. And I put a picture here. And that's a very clear example of competence and performance. And I'm pretty sure that it could relate to you. So here's Tarzan, and he's practicing because he's going to meet Jane. And that's really, really similar to what when we, I don't know, rehearse or practice something in front of a mirror. So he says, okay, how do you do? My name is Tarzan, and I believe you are known as Jane. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, and you must be Jane. I am Tarzan. It's a pleasure to meet you. So he is practicing, he has the words, he knows how to do it. And when he gets there, he says, me, Tarzan, you, Jane, right? So is he competent? Probably, right? But his performance was not the best this time. So competence is an idealized capacity and performance is the actual utterance, right? When we say it. So performance may be influenced by competence, but it is not a direct reflection of it, right? So since we're talking about competence, let's talk about Del Hymes. Hymes coined the term communicative competence, reacting against Noam Chomsky's distinction between competence and performance. And he poses that a language user needs to use the language not only correctly, based on linguistic competence, but also appropriately, based on communicative competence. So in order to use language appropriately, linguistic competence is not enough. And here's the difference between accuracy and fluency. There was more to language than idealized grammar, right? There's more. It's not just, oh, you know it, you don't know it, right? No, we have several aspects that we need to consider. For example, we have to speak in a socially appropriate manner to communicate well, right? When Chomsky described competence, he didn't take into consideration those aspects. The social aspect, for example, that somebody mentioned at the beginning. So Canali and Swain, a few years later, oh, wait, look, I have Janet here. When my students solve grammar exercises, they do well, but when they write an essay, they make so many grammar mistakes they wouldn't make. They would answer correctly in an exercise. Is that a performance error? Absolutely, that's a great example. Yes, they know it, but sometimes they don't know how to apply it. But that doesn't mean that they're not competent. It's when I've had students in the past that speak really fluently, but they make a lot of mistakes. Sometimes they don't, but those are performance errors, right? It doesn't mean that they are not competent. So thank you very much for your observation, Janet. So let's go back to Canali and Swain in the 80s, and then Canali 3 years later alone in a book, right, 1983. They are applied linguists, and they published a very influential article in which they argue that the ability to communicate required 4 different sub-competencies. And Canali and Swain understood communicative competence as a synthesis of an underlying system of knowledge and skill needed for communication. So what do you guys think those 4 different sub-competencies are? Can you think of sub-competencies that Canali and Swain described, that they talked about? Just give me random guesses. We have 4 different sub-competencies. Any ideas? Should I give you the answer? I'm gonna wait. Okay. Osvaldo says listening, writing, speaking, reading. Oh, okay. You're talking about the skills. It is related, but these are not the competencies that I'm looking for. I'm going to show you. Here are the 4 sub-competencies. The first one is grammatical competence. Sociolinguistic competence, it's another one. Strategic competence and discourse competence. Linguistic, yes, Cecilia, very good. Linguistic or sociolinguistic competence. Yeah, grammatical competence is sometimes called or referred as to linguistic competence. So that was good. So these are the 4 sub-competencies that Canelli and Swain found, and they said, you know what? I think that to achieve communicative competence, we need more, right? We need these 4 competencies. So we're going to break them down. First of all, grammatical competence. How can I develop this grammatical competence? Or what is grammatical competence? Can you guys tell me in the chat? What is grammatical competence? Oh, by the way, there is a link so you can fill it in for your attendance. It's going to be posted. Okay, Jose says structures, rules. Very good, Olga. Yes, rules. Correct use of language. Know the rules. Exactly, right? For example, prepositions. The knowledge of the grammatical elements of the language and the ability to use them in a speech. That was very good, okay? Rules and knowing how to use them. Knowledge and grammatical elements. Accuracy. Ability to properly communicate language. Accuracy. Very good. Yes, yes. We have the link on the chat so you can fill it in and you're going to be present for the conference. So grammatical competence, very good. You were excellent. The knowledge of grammar, lexis, phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. That's 1. So let's break them down. When we talk about grammar, we're talking about the rules. So several people said the rules of the language. That was great. When we talk about lexis, we talk about vocabulary, right? The words used in text or spoken data. When we talk about phonology, we're talking about the systems and patterns of speech sounds in a language. I can give you a very good example that I loved. I love this example. I took a applied linguistics course a few years ago, and there was a difference between the light L and the dark L. So the light L, for example, is when we begin a word with L. Love, light, any other word starting with the letter L. Lexis, L. And then we have, that's the light L. And the dark L is the L that we use when we finish a word. For example, doll or scale. So that's different. Light, scale, right? The O, that's a different kind of L. So that is an aspect of phonology. Phonology studies that, right? Then we have morphology, the study of word formation or how words are formed in a language. For example, we have the word cookie, and then we have, if we add the suffix s, we have cookies. So we have singular and we have plural. So that is an aspect of morphology. And then we have syntax. Syntax is the order or arrangement of words and phrases to form proper sentences. So when we start sentences, we use what? A subject, and then we need the verb, and then the complement. And what if we have adverb? Where does the adverb go? Where does the auxiliary verb go, right? So that order is an aspect of syntax. And then at the end, we have semantics, and which is the study of the meaning in language. In the case of happy, right? So what is the synonym? Okay, it could be glad, it could be joyful, etc. Right? So all these aspects are within this grammatical competence. Now, grammatical competence is the ability to produce and recognize well-formed phrases and sentences. So if you hear that I'm saying something incorrect, excellent. You are grammatically competent, right? You could recognize that I made a mistake. If you recognize when you make mistakes, excellent. You're going to be grammatically competent. If you're not, well, we can still work on that, right? So linguistic or grammatical competence is fundamental, and our students can definitely improve in this area. In fact, most students I've met, they realize that they need to improve in this area. And this is not the same as the explicit knowledge of rules. When we talk about knowing this, it's not talking about, I'm not going to tell my student, okay, what is phonology? Right? No. What is morphology? No. Tell me the rules of grammar, right? No. We're not talking about knowing the explicit rules, but we want them to know how to apply them, right? That's what we want. So a person, Sauvignon said in 1997, a person demonstrates grammatical competence by using a rule, not by stating a rule. So for the same happens in Spanish. I had a friend, he's from the US, and he was taking Spanish classes. And he had a lot of questions about grammatical aspects in Spanish. I don't know the rules in Spanish. I know the rules in English. I'm not a Spanish teacher. I'm an English teacher. So I didn't know how to answer. I don't know the rules, right? I know I'm competent in Spanish, right? I have, grammatical competence. I mean, that's what I think. But I don't know the rules, right? So it doesn't matter if you don't know the rules, as long as you're doing it right, that's great. So students don't need to know the terms, right? They don't need to know the terms. They don't need to know what phonology is, what morphology is, etc. Right? Let's move on. Sociolinguistic competence. What is sociolinguistic competence? What do you think in the chat? Sociolinguistic competence. Registers, very good, Jose. That's great. Yes, it is related to register. Absolutely. Yes, that is correct. So sociolinguistic competence relates to the learner's ability to use English that matches the social context that they are in. For example, you're not going to go to class and tell your students, hey, what's up, dude? That's not appropriate, right? So we need to be aware of the context. Osvaldo says, knowing what expressions to be used in different situations. Absolutely. Yes, we need to discriminate, right? And we're not going to be using slang in class. I mean, we could, but not too much, hopefully. How to communicate in different situations, Consuelo, that's great. Absolutely. Yamir says the ability to communicate appropriately by using the right words, expressions, attitude towards a specific topic. That's excellent. Yes, very good. So sociolinguistic competence requires an understanding of the target language. We have to think about the culture as well. The things that should be talked about and what should not be talked about. What is considered, polite, what is not, avoiding taboo topics. So it's it depends on the country as well, right? It depends on the city sometimes, right? Yeah, because we don't want to be rude. Now, I put this picture because there's something that I usually tell my students when we talk about food and we talk about restaurants and we talk about ordering food in a restaurant, which is don't say I want, right? We don't say I want. People are going to think people are going to, perceive, and they're going to feel that you're being rude. So don't say I want. You can say I would like to order, could I get, right, etc. But using different terms, right? So Sociolinguistic competence, it has to do with the social context, some specific norms, values, beliefs, behavioral patterns of a culture. So yeah, it's really, really cultural. You need to be aware of that. And the social context affects what you say, when you say it, how you say it, and the person you're saying it to, right? So we have to think about the register. Someone said register. We have to think of formality, politeness, and appropriateness. So I would say that this is harder to teach. It's hard to teach, sociolinguistic competence. We as teachers do the most to help students understand, what is appropriate and what is not. But there are some things in English that I don't know, I'm pretty sure, because I don't know everything. So that's it is how it is, right? It is what it is. So what is appropriate? And it's appropriate according to whom, right? And there's something that's really, really important that it's not there, but it also involves when not to say anything. So silence is also, communication. Let's move on. Strategic competence. In the chat, what is strategic competence? What do you think? Okay, the ability to use language to organize effective messages and to overcome potential communication problems. That's great. Yes, that's excellent. Any other person? How to address to succeed. All right. Let's take a look at this. If you look at the picture, what do you see? A person that's struggling. It's struggling because he feels like, I don't know, too much. Oh, he's nervous, maybe he's anxious. And I think it happens to everybody that, or at least it happened to me, that I was when overwhelmed, exactly, too stressed, exactly. It happened to me when I was learning English, that I could understand everything of what my teachers were saying, and I couldn't respond. It was really frustrating. It was hard for me to express myself. In my mind, in my head, it was perfect, right? I had the perfect idea, but then when I had to verbalize it, it didn't come out, right? So exactly. It's something when we have to communicate, right? Sometimes we feel nervous. Perhaps we can't exactly. Maybe he can't speak, really, really well in English. So that's why he feels like that. So strategic competence, it refers to the speaker's ability to recover from communication breakdowns. Communication breakdowns. I like that word, that phrase. So communication breakdown is defined as a failure to exchange information and resulting in a lack of communication. We've all had these communication breakdowns. You're speaking and suddenly you're like, you stop, you forgot the idea, you don't know what else to say. That's a communication breakdown. So there are times when a learner may need to ask someone to repeat something or ask for clarification, and that's totally fine. Students need to know that when they don't understand, that's normal. It happens in Spanish. Sometimes I'm talking to my friends, and they say something I don't understand. What do I say? What did you say? Right? So it's totally normal if we ask someone to repeat. We don't always need to understand everything. I don't understand everything all the time. So there are times where we can use gestures, for example, to facilitate conversation. We can even change our voice, like the pitch, our voice pitch. So whatever the case may be, we all need to do that at some point. The challenge is that many of our learners are not familiar with how to do it. They don't have the strategies. So that's our responsibility. That's how we could help them. So we could help them overcome language gaps, right? Tell them, yeah, use gestures. Ask them to repeat. It's okay. You can say pardon, and the person is going to repeat, right? Asking for repetition, says Lilia. Very good. Yeah, for clarification. Absolutely. We can plan and assess the effectiveness of communication. It's important to know and to we can see in the other person's face when they're not getting the message, when they don't understand, when it's not clear. So if it's not clear, we need to make sure that there is communication. So we can tell them, like, would you like me to repeat again? Because this is both sides, right? Not just you, but the other person as well. Achieve conversational fluency. We don't need to speak like a native speaker, right? As long as we are fluent in the language, that's perfect. And there is a modified text for audience and purposes in case you're writing. We're not going to use a very, very advanced register if you're talking to students in English 1, basic students. That doesn't make any sense, right? Teachers, ideally, they're not going to show off. We want students to learn. So of course we can manage that, and we can work according to the level of our students. There's an example, which is circumlocution. And it's basically when we try to explain something using many words, or a concept that can usually be explained in one or a few words. For example, let's say I wanted to say elephant, but I forgot how to say elephant. It happens sometimes. We forget about little things. So I can say, okay, it's a big gray animal with a trunk, and people will understand, right? So we can use that technique, that strategy to, students can use that. And there's something in class that usually happens. Students ask, oh, teacher, how do I say that? What I say is, find a word that you know. Sometimes they look for the most difficult word in English, and where there are so many words that they know, they should work with what they have, right? With their resources. So they can use this circumlocution strategy to say whatever it is they're going to say. Very good. Next, discourse competence. That was added a few years later. We have, Canali and Swain described or named only 3, and 3 years later, discourse competence was added. So what is discourse competence in the chat? What do you all think? Yamir, one more time. The ability to use, produce, and recognize coherent and cohesive texts in an oral or written form. That's excellent. Has it happened to you that it's Monday and you ask your students, what did you do last weekend? What did you do on Saturday? What did you do on Sunday? What do they answer? What do they usually answer? When you ask students, what did you do during the weekend? Did you go out? Anything fun? You can tell me. They say nothing. Exactly. They say nothing, period. Very good, Olga. They say, for example, here, they're in the park. What did you do last weekend? Sleep, period. Right? And that's it. That is not really good, right? That's not what we expect from students. So what we expect, or what we want students to do, is to create and to make conversation, right? So discourse competence is actually the ability to connect sentences coherently. And there are 2 main aspects. And Yamir said it when I asked what discourse competence was. Cohesion, which is the act of forming a whole unit. It is effectively a subset of coherence. Very good. Arrange structures with coherence. Absolutely. Very good, Cecilia. Jose, not being monosyllabic. Absolutely. Yeah. We don't want students to answer, to give us one-word answers or two-word answers. Of course not. We want them to produce more, right? To make conversation. So that's cohesion, and coherence is the quality of being logical, consistent, and able to be understood. So how do we, as teachers, help develop this competence? One way is to take them through real-world conversations and show them that what they can say. Sometimes I wonder, okay, maybe they don't know what they have to say. So that's why they're giving me one-word answer, a two-word answer. Maybe they don't know. I say, okay, maybe this is my fault. Right? I'm concerned about their learning experience, their learning process. So we can show them what they can say in certain situations. I had a student once, and he asked me, "Teacher, what do I say when someone said, 'What's up?' I don't know how to answer." Or someone said, "Teacher, I don't know how to say, how's it going?" Because sometimes I say, "Hey, how's it going?" And they don't know how to answer. So they're like frozen, right? Paralyzed. They don't know how to reply. So sometimes they don't know. And it's, we could help them with that. We could help them. Mirva says, they are ashamed of making mistakes. Yes, absolutely, right? That's why we want to create this atmosphere. And we're actually going to talk about that, creating the proper atmosphere in the class. Complex sentences are good. They can give us the full idea. Absolutely. Yes, very good, Jessica. Yes, they can give us full ideas. I usually tell them, right? Give me a full sentence, right? I know that sometimes it's not necessary, but because they're learning, they need to know how to form sentences. So it's great to produce longer sentences, not necessarily complex, but a simple sentence with subject and verb and complement, that's great, right? Providing some prompts so they can make their sentences more easily. Absolutely, yes. Is it related to a correct pronunciation? Well, discourse competence, no, we're just talking about forming the units. Pronunciation is in the grammatical competence. They lack practice. Yes, they lack practice. And that's a very common, that's a common issue that happens in the classroom. Sometimes, I usually tell my students, we don't have a lot of opportunities to speak English outside of the classroom, right? We live in a Spanish-speaking country. So when you leave the class, do you practice English elsewhere or not? I do, because I work with English, but they don't, right? So I usually tell them they should take advantage, right? They should take advantage of the opportunity because they're in the class. They can ask questions, they can ask for feedback. So it's great. So we have cohesive devices and discourse markers. So speakers and writers often use different devices to structure their discourse. And these devices connect what they're saying to what they have said before and to what they're going to say. So that their overall message looks coherent and cohesive. So some of these markers or cohesive devices we have in spoken discourse, in spoken language. They're called discourse markers because they mark out the beginning of a new instance or of discourse, right? So how does that work? We can say, well, anyway, so that gives us an idea of that something's coming, right? In written texts, cohesive devices are used to create cohesion. And in that case, we can use linking words, for example. And those linking words help us continue with the sequence or the idea. We can use linking words, conjunctions, linking adverbs, however, moreover, furthermore, to sum up, for example, exactly. That's correct, Jose. We have more, right? Sequencing words, etc. That gives us an idea of what's coming, and it helps us connect our paragraph or our paragraph so it can be coherent and cohesive. Also known as speech markers. Absolutely, yes. And so that's basically, this course competence. Very good. Let's move on. So can we teach communicative competence? Can I say, okay, students, today we're going to be very communicative, period. Not just by telling students what to say, when and how, because communication is not like that. You don't know when you talk to someone, when you go to the grocery store, when you go to to the movies and you talk to the lady, or when you go to the bank, you don't know what you're going to find. You don't know the kind of questions they're going to answer. So this is practice, right? This is just practice. So not just by telling students what to say, when and how, you're going to be communicative competent. So when we talk about communicative competence, we need to set objectives. And when we set objectives, it's not only about writing the objective on the board and leaving the objective there and then forget about it. No, when we create the objective and we select the objective, we need to take it into consideration throughout our lesson. And we need to be thinking about a student's achievement, right? How are they going to accomplish it? What are they going to do that's going to help so they're going to accomplish and achieve the objective, right? So how can we do that? With communicative language teaching, right? That's a method. You've probably heard of this method in the past. I'm going to show a short video. Jack C. Richards is on the video. Let me share my sound. He is an internationally renowned specialist in second and foreign language acquisition and applied linguist. There are a lot of videos on YouTube. He's really famous. You have probably seen some of his videos. So we're going to watch this short clip where he explains just a little bit briefly communicative language teaching, what that is. So okay, there it is.
Hello again. Today I'd like to talk about communicative language teaching. It's an approach to language teaching that's been around for a long time, and indeed many of my books are based on the philosophy of communicative language teaching. So I'd like to just try to explain what it means. It's an approach which developed as a reaction away from exclusively grammar-focused approaches to teaching that really gave priority to accuracy and to the sentence as the unit of presentation and practice in the classroom. Communicative language teaching argues, of course, that the goal of language learning is communicative competence, and that we develop communicative competence through making communication the focus of the classroom, that we learn language through communication, that language is the byproduct of using language to communicate. And in order to do this, activities have to be developed that enable students to practice communicating in different ways according to their language proficiency level, through tasks, through focusing on role plays, through information sharing activities, and activities of that kind which require students to draw on their communicative resources and to try to make communication possible in the classroom. So communicative language teaching is essentially a set of general principles that refers to how communication can be the focus of teaching and learning, and which attributes the acquisition of communicative competence to providing opportunities for students to practice communicating through their classroom materials. So communicative language teaching is alive and well today. It's taken different forms in recent years. In some contexts, it's led to what we call task-based teaching. In others, it's led to text-based teaching, and others, it's led to content-based teaching, which I'll talk about in other podcasts. But the principles of communicative language teaching, I think, are alive and well and still important for us to consider today. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, have you heard of communicative language teaching in the past? Yes, probably, right? When we talk about methods, right, there are several methods. Communicative language teaching was one, which is alive until today, right, as he mentions. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. Okay, here it is, communicative language teaching. So teachers who use this approach in English as a second language or as a foreign language in our case, in our classrooms, they encourage students to use English, right, to promote meaningful language use. Teachers can use activities that encourage students to speak in the performance of meaningful tasks. So when we talk about this approach, right, interaction is both the method and the goal of education. That's why in our cases, for example, I have face-to-face classes and I also have online classes. So in my online classes, I make sure that students communicate with each other, maybe in the breakout rooms every class, so they have the opportunity to speak, which is the goal. And sometimes I've heard teachers, and I've seen, because I observe classes from time to time, that sometimes teachers don't do breakout rooms, they don't make students communicate, which means that they're not focusing on communication, which is not good for the students. How are they going to practice if they only know the theory? So over here, we have some of the characteristics of communicative language teaching. And some of the characteristics that I found, and I thought that they're really, really interesting and important, is, first of all, the class needs to be student-centered, which means that students are going to be encouraged to do most of the talking rather than passively listening to lectures. Of course, in intermediate and advanced classes, that's easier. Students can do most of the talking. With basic students, that is not that easy because students do not have a lot to produce. They don't have a lot of vocabulary. They don't have a lot of grammar rules, but we need to try to do it as much as possible. A lot of teacher talking time, like TTT, is not good. And when in my classes, when I talk a lot, I feel kind of bad. I feel like I need students to say something. Otherwise, I feel like in a traditional classroom when I speak and speak and speak, right? Which is not ideal. Then we have correction. Correction in this approach is avoided. I mean, not avoided completely. It's not that I'm not going to correct students. It's not that I'm not going to give students feedback, but instead, I'm going to provide indirect feedback. I don't want to correct them instantly. Okay, you say something incorrect, I'm going to correct it right away because that's not allowed in my class. So, of course, that's not the case, but we can, use indirect feedback. For example, a student said, people is very friendly here. And I can say, oh, people are friendly, right? There are gonna be cases where students are gonna grab it immediately, and they're gonna be, oh, yes, people are, you're right? Which is a strategy, right? I mean, it's a competence, strategic competence, right? If he realizes, that's great. But sometimes they're not going to be realized. Some students are a little bit, distracted. They don't they don't notice. So we're going to have to be a little bit more obvious with those students. But we don't want to correct them, at that exact moment, because of course, I mean, can you imagine having a conversation and then someone correcting you all the time? And then of course you're going to lose interest. You're gonna forget what you were saying. So that's not ideal. Then we have real life scenarios, and that approach promotes meaningful interaction through various activities based on real life situations. That's really, really important, and that's also part of the sociolinguistic competence. And what can we do? We can include role-playing scenarios. We can discuss hobbies, right? What you like doing. We can negotiate prices, describing books, describing movies, series. My students are obsessed with, I don't know, Netflix and HBO and all these streaming platforms. Yesterday in my class, they wanted to talk about that, but the class was not about that. So yeah, they're really, really enthusiastic about it, right? So we need to enable students to use English in practical contexts. So we need to bring it to reality. If we can give examples of things that could happen, I don't know, in the US or here, right? So they feel like something, it's relatable, that's great, right? If they can relate, if they can relate to this scenario, to the context, it's perfect. It's gonna be meaningful. Group work and pairing activities. These activities are the most effective when students work together, because we want them to communicate, and that mimics real communication. That's going to encourage fluency. They can learn from each other. Sometimes students actually correct the others when they say something that is incorrect, or they can negotiate, like, oh, I think you don't say that, you say that. Oh, let's ask the teacher because the teacher knows, right? But before asking me, there was a conversation about it, and that's good. That's what we want to promote. When we talk about integrated skills, we talk about instructors incorporating the 4 skills. So I know we're talking about communicative language teaching, but it's not just speaking, right? It's also listening. Of course, speaking. It's also reading. Why not? It's also writing. So we can incorporate those 4 skills, activities, to provide a more holistic language learning experience. For example, students may watch a video and then they can write an opinion. They can write reviews about a movie. They can, discuss about a topic, right? They can read something and then discuss it together, getting groups. So it's not just, oh, let's speak and I give you a topic. No, they can, of course, work with different skills, and not just listening and speaking, but also reading and writing. So this approach, communicative language teaching, prioritizes active communication in real life situations. Now, there are some characteristics that are, given to the CLT, but they're actually not. The communicative language teaching is not teaching conversation. How can I teach conversation? It's not just, okay, let's chat. No, of course, everything has a purpose, and that's why we have objectives. So we need objectives. We need the grammar that we're going to be, tackling. We need several things that, to create this conversation. But the classes are not just conversation, right? Remember that this is integrated. We're going to be integrating all the skills in a more holistic way. And then we have absence of grammar. When they think about communicative language teaching, they immediately think about speaking. But when we speak, we also need grammar. I wouldn't be speaking to here today if I didn't know grammar, if I didn't know anything about grammar. Of course, I know grammar. But students do not need to know the rules, right? You can teach grammar, inductively or deductively. So yeah, it's not that grammar is going to disappear from the equation. Absolutely not. We're going to be considering it. It's not just the focus. And then emphasis on open-ended discussion activities. It's not just, okay, let's talk about whatever. No, right? Because remember, we have objectives, and it's not just open-ended discussion and activities where they just have to speak. We're integrating everything. We're using reading activities. We're using writing activities because, we can produce in both orally and in a written text. Excellent. So I teach a course here at the university. It's called Conversation Course, 21st Century Communicative Skills. And when I teach this, now that I was doing the presentation for the conference, I was thinking, wow, like these 4 sub-competencies are important. And I said, wow, am I implementing those competencies in my course, right? Because I have never reflected like that. I've never reflected like that. I've never thought about it so deeply. So I started thinking, right? And I said, okay, am I teaching grammar? Are my students competent in grammar? Okay, yes, they kind of know the rules. Well, not the rules, but they know how the rules work. Do they have strategies? Yeah, some of them, right? We can still work, right? Of course. Do they know the context? Do they have the register? I think so, right? They haven't said anything crazy yet, right? So I think so. I would say that knowing all the, I don't know, everything that's appropriate in a language, it's a lot. It's not easy. But I think they know. They're pretty good students. Are they cohesive? Are they coherent? Most of the time I understand, right? So what can we do to get our students to be communicative? It's just practice, right? So I was reading the abstract of this conversation course, and it said, all non-native speakers have faced situations where they do not understand what a native speaker is saying. It is very frustrating. It is even more frustrating when we understand what they're saying, but we cannot give a proper response. I have a student, and he was advanced, and he said, wow, teacher, I feel so frustrated. And I said, why? And he said, because I'm listening to a rap song and I don't understand. And I said, well, don't feel bad because I don't understand either. It's too fast, right? Sometimes it happens in Spanish as well, that I don't understand like rap music. What are they saying? So I think that's totally normal. Now, well, in this course, we basically talk about we watch videos, we listen to recordings. We do not use a lot of texts, so we don't do a lot of reading. But we do work on vocabulary, a little bit of grammar, and we communicate, which is the focus, right? Because students feel nervous, they feel anxious, they don't feel confident when speaking English, and that's why they're here, because they want to practice. So do I want my students to speak perfectly and sound like a native speaker? Absolutely not, right? That's not the goal. The goal is to be communicative. The goal is to be fluent. Do they have to speak like, wow, really, really fluent? No. As long as it is understandable, that's great. So I follow a traditional sequence or a traditional pedagogical model, right? Which is PPP. You know that one, right? PPP. Do you know this traditional sequence or pedagogical model? What is PPP in our classes when we, for example, when you're planning your classes? Okay, Luis is asking for it. Practice, presentation, and production. Very good. Okay, excellent. Okay, some people know the term. So I follow this traditional sequence or pedagogical model. So I start with the warm-up. And I like when teachers spend a lot of time doing the warm-up. I think it's fun. Sometimes I feel like my warm-ups are super short. So I would like to have more, longer warm-ups. I don't know. So after that, we have, the first P, which is presentation. And then we have practice. And then we have production. And then ideally, we should have the wrap up, right? Or the final part. So sometimes I've talked to other teachers and they say, no, sometimes we don't have time for the production part. And I say, why? But production, I feel like the production is the most important one. How are they going to communicate? How are they going to practice what has been presented to them, right? So it's important, right? And it's important to remember that the teacher is just a facilitator. It's not the center of the class. And I think it's important to consider it, right? So how do we apply this communicative language teaching in the classroom? The classroom activities used in communicative language teaching promote communication and language development in the target language. These activities are designed to engage students in meaningful conversations and interactions. And I'm going to show you some activities that we can use in the classroom, right? You probably know a lot of them. Maybe you can tell me, you can give me some more in the chat box while we're breaking them down, because we're gonna take it's gonna be there. And during the last few decades, there has been a growing need for fluent communication skills in today's globalized world, right? So I was thinking, because I've been working on this communicative language teaching conference. I've been doing this PBT for a while, and I said, wow, I have students that really, really enjoy my class. And I started thinking about school, because I was a really, really good student in my school. Okay, maybe I'm biased, but I feel like I was a good student. So when I finished my high school, I didn't speak English. I know the rules. So is that going to be our objective? Is my objective for students to only get good grades, or do I want my students to actually learn? Am I involved in my students' learning process or not? So students need to be prepared for real life scenarios instead of just helping them to pass a superficial test. I don't know, maybe the FCE. And they're studying just for the FCE and then by English. No, right? I want my students to learn. Maybe it's too altruistic, I don't know. But traditional language teaching methods focus on grammar and vocabulary with less emphasis on communication skills. So that's what they lack, right? Communication in class. And we have plenty of strategies and activities that can be used in the class. So let's start with the conclusions. How do we apply communicative language teaching in the classroom? We are going to use, okay, look. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the chat. Role play, problem solving tasks, practice different formal and informal interaction. That's great. Yes. right? So we can actually work with this sociolinguistic competence, right? We're going to be promoting it through games, role play, problem solving tasks. Absolutely. Yes, very good. Very, very good. Short speeches, like presentations, information gaps. Very good. So over here I have, student to student activities, pair discussions, right? Do you make your students work in pairs? If you do, that's great. Role playing, right? And other collaborative tasks. Someone is saying, group works, maybe debates, puzzle solving. We have a lot, right? We have a lot of ideas. Pair talk, absolutely. Yes, think, pair talk. Very good. If you have more ideas, just put them in the chat and I'm going to be reading them. Scavenger hunt, I like that. Yes, absolutely. Very good. So next, communicative purpose, clear situation or context. Is our context, is the situation clear? Is the purpose clear? Is the objective clear? Activities should include a clear situation or context. Someone said, okay, maybe we can, make a role play, someone doing it with a informal register and another person with a formal or informal register, so we can see both, right, in different contexts. That's great. The roles of the speakers and communicative purpose as well. Now the other one, supportive atmosphere, and somebody mentioned it, right? I'm pretty sure that somebody mentioned atmosphere. When we talk about atmosphere, we think about creating an environment where students feel confident. We know Krashen's hypothesis, right? The affective filter. So if it's like a barrier, right? So if the barrier is up, then students are less likely to learn because they're going to feel anxious. They're not going to feel comfortable. And that happens a lot, sometimes due to, past experiences with English. They don't feel comfortable. I've had a lot of students, they say, I don't like English. And I say, but why? English is so fun. Well, for me. And I've had students as well that tell me, wow, teacher, I didn't like English in the past and now I like it. So for me, that's like, wow, thank you very much, right? Because you're learning. For me, the only purpose, right, of being a teacher is for them to learn, to actually learn and to use it, right? To use English. Ask a student to be a teacher for a moment, asking daily routines, questions, help them to familiarize with the daily language. Absolutely, yes. Asking students to be the teachers or to role play as teachers, that's great. Absolutely. Okay. To put their ideas on their verbal level. Exactly. Yes. If we are working with basic students, then of course it has to be basic. Now, so let's go back to the supportive atmosphere. Yeah. Oh, there's a heart over here. Okay, 2 hearts now. Teachers should concentrate on providing a supportive learning atmosphere. And I don't know, do you feel like you are providing that to your students? Do they feel comfortable in the class? Are you providing a supportive learning atmosphere? That's important, right? Personalized tasks. We need to think about the levels. We need to think about the needs. We need to think about their interests. Here, we also think about their learning styles, right? We think about multiple intelligences, right? That Howard Gardner developed. So are we personalizing our classes according to the group of students that we have or not, right? That's something that we need to take into consideration. This is just for you to reflect, right? We are reflecting together. I'm reflecting on my pedagogical, areas as well. So next, focus on fluency before accuracy. When we say that, it's just because we want to encourage our students to prioritize fluency and communication. Obviously, as a teacher, we are going to address accuracy when necessary, but it is good to give the priority and emphasis on fluency. Provide feedback and corrections in a supportive manner, right? I had a teacher once, and he said, well, I was reading something and I said public, and he said, what? And several times, because he wanted me to realize what the mistake was. But of course, if I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm never going to do it. And I kept saying public because I didn't know that the correct word is public. So in that moment, I still remember, I felt really embarrassed. I didn't want to go to his class. I didn't feel like I was in a supportive atmosphere. So that teacher is not a good reference, but that's a very good idea of what I wouldn't do in my class. So we were talking about focus on fluency before accuracy. It's not that we're not going to focus on accuracy. It's not that I'm not going to correct my students. Of course, I'm going to do it. It's just that it's not going to be the priority. Yes, we're going to give feedback. Exactly. Feedback is so important. Thank you, Brigitte. And then self-reflection. Do your students reflect, right? I've seen a lot of students put in their PPTs or in their classes metacognition. But I say, do students actually know what metacognition is? Do they need to understand? Do they need to know what that is? Maybe teachers, right? Maybe teachers should know what that is. But students, I don't think it's necessary, right? Now, a good way to self-reflect is using tools, right? I remember I asked my students to create a video once, right, as a project. And they created this video. They were supposedly in a restaurant ordering food, and it was a very good video. And what I liked about it is because they could see and watch their videos, and they could see their pronunciation, they could see their fluency, because not many times, and I don't think they are aware of how they do it, like their performance. Do they record themselves? I record myself speaking all the time. I have a lot of recordings, right, of me. So if you listen to my recording from, I don't know, 2010, my English was not the same. It was terrible. So, I can reflect on that and I say, wow, I have improved so much, right? So I think using recordings, voice recordings or video recordings, I think it's great. They can, give themselves feedback. So yeah, those are some of the activities or the strategies that we can use to implement communicative language teaching in the classroom. So to wrap up, I want to ask you, well, it's going to be a pub quiz. I have a few questions for you. Number one, how does communicative language teaching differ from traditional language teaching methods? So we have A, CLT focuses on grammar and vocabulary. B, traditional methods emphasize fluency over accuracy. CLT encourages students to actively engage in communication. D, traditional methods prioritize passive listening. So which one is correct? Only one option though. Okay, everyone's like C. Very good. C is the right answer. So communicative language teaching differ from traditional language teaching methods because we encourages, this approach, the CLT approach, encourages students to actively engage in communication. Traditional methods did not do that. Ronald says, in my case, I use flip at the end, at the final of the bimester. They have to see the videos and reflect about their advance. That's wonderful. Yes. Okay. Very good. You see, you are way ahead of the game. That's great, Ronald. Lou says, me too. That's excellent. All right. Yes. I have done it. I didn't know that teachers could do it. Teachers do it too. That's excellent. You see, you already use this communicative language teaching. Well, at least a portion of it. Excellent. Flip is a great resource, says Claudia. Very good. I think so too. Let's go with the next question. I have more. Which of the following is not one of the sub-competencies proposed by Canali and Swain in communicative competence? A, grammatical competence, sociolinguistic competence, strategic competence, phonological competence. D. Okay. Very good. Yeah, that's correct. It's correct. Phonological competence. Now, phonological competence, I mean, phonology is actually really important. If we want to work on phonology, that is within one of these competences. Which competence is included in phonological competence in this case? In A, exactly, in grammatical competence. Grammatical competence encompasses, let's remember, phonology, grammar, lexis, syntax, and all the rest, right? Very good. That's excellent. 3. Okay, that's a little bit longer. What is the main distinction between competence and performance in language learning according to Noam Chomsky? A, competence is the ability to perform well, while performance is knowledge of grammar. Competence refers to knowledge of the linguistic system, while performance involves using the language. Competence is related to sociolinguistic skills, while performance focuses on grammatical accuracy. Wow, you guys are fast. And D, competence encompasses fluency, while performing relates to vocabulary. It's B. Very good. You see, that was a hasty answer. That's why you got A. So the main distinction between competence and performance, let's remember what Noam Chomsky said, is that competence refers to knowledge of the linguistic system, right? What we know. While performance involves using the language, what you can observe. So in our class, we, of course, teach, right? We do exercises. The students understand, they absorb all this, and then they can perform, right? So they are related, right? But remember that Haim said it is not a direct reflection, right? Performance is not a direct reflection of competence, because sometimes we can be nervous, right? Sometimes we do badly and it's a bad day, right? Sometimes it's great, right? And it's great when you truly portray and when you truly show what you can do and what you are competent, right? And how you can be competent. Error, versus mistakes. Very good. Exactly. Next. What is the primary goal of teaching strategic competence to language learners? A, to enhance grammatical accuracy. B, to improve reading comprehension. C, to help students overcome communication breakdowns. And D, to increase vocabulary. Okay, everyone's saying C. Absolutely, very good. To help students overcome communication breakdowns, right? Let's remember that strategic competence is actually for students to realize and, overcome this barrier of communication breakdowns with strategies like circumlocution. They can use other words to say it. They should work with what they have, right? And not just ask around, oh, how do I say that? How do I say that? Stop asking what they know. I mean, how you say things when you can, use your own resources, right? But that's something that they have to learn by themselves. It's like when students are learning and they translate everything in their heads. So that's not good, right? That's a communication breakdown, because sometimes, sometimes in English and Spanish, expressions are different. Well, most of the time they are different. So how am I going to literally translate a word or an expression in Spanish that doesn't exist in English? And sometimes students want to do that, right? So once they understand that languages don't work in the same way, in terms of expression and slang and, and more, they are going to be able to adequate the strategies to be able to talk and develop these strategies to be sufficient, right? So it's been great to get to know you. Let's please take into consideration the conclusions to apply CLT in your classroom in every day, to be able to produce, to communicate, to develop this competence that students need. And I really, really hope that you can reflect on your teaching techniques and your teaching methodologies to get better. I know you're here in this conference because, of course, you want to improve. I want to improve every day. We are teachers, right? We like to learn. And well, thank you very much, everyone. Here's my contact information and the contact information of the specialization program for English teachers that we have at the Ricardo Palma University. And well, thank you very much. And we'll see you next month in October for another conference about error correction. I think you're going to enjoy it. So thank you very much and have a good night. Bye-bye. Did you all fill in the form? I hope so. All right. Thank you very much. Not yet. Bye-bye, everyone. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye, Roy. Bye-bye, Alicia. Bye-bye, Julissa. Yes, we are going to send a summary of the presentation along with the certificates. So you will receive a summary of this to your email.